afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Cultivating Success webinar on best practices for farm deliveries, pickup, and CSAs during COVID-19. This webinar is brought to you by Cultivating Success. The Cultivating Success program is a partnership of University of Idaho Extension, the nonprofit organization Rural Roots, and the Washington State University Food Systems Program. A couple of webinar tips. We have noticed that people's Wi-Fi bandwidth is a little bit narrow in these times when so many people are working from home. If you're seeing that the slides are advancing slowly for you or you're having trouble with your sound, we suggest that you close any other programs that are running on your computer using your internet bandwidth. It might also be helpful to shut the internet off on some other devices that you have. So for instance, if you're watching on your computer and you take your phone off of Wi-Fi, that might help you out a little bit as well. If you are running into some challenges with sound, there is a call-in number that was provided in your welcome email. Please go ahead and call in on your telephone. If you do that, mute your computer so you won't get feedback. At any time, you can type questions for the speaker into the question and answer box that you'll find in the control bar at the bottom of your screen. We also have a chat box. We tend to use that chat box more if there are any technical issues. So if possible, please go ahead and type into the question and answer box. We will be monitoring both. If you had registered by about 12:30 Pacific today, I did email you the slide handouts in two formats. One is a full page of each slide, which is easier for viewing, and then a second handout that has 4 slides per page in case you would like to print them. We will also be recording this webinar and posting it on the Cultivating Success website along with the webinar handout. With that, I would like to introduce today's presenter. Stephanie Smith is a consumer food safety specialist at Washington State University, located on the Pullman campus. We've been really fortunate to have Stephanie partner with us through Cultivating Success to offer a number of webinars on food safety best practices. This is her second webinar on food safety during COVID-19. The first one that she gave was on community gardens, and you can find that recording on the Cultivating Success website. I'm Colette D. Phelps. I'll be moderating the webinar today. I'm an area extension educator in community food systems, and I serve the northern part of Idaho with some statewide responsibilities. So thank you very much for joining us today. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and invite Stephanie to share hers and begin the presentation.
I'm in the process of getting the slides up, but I want to thank you all for joining us today. And there we go. Okay. So thank you all for joining us today. We're going to talk about some of the best practices for farm deliveries, pickups, and CSAs during the pandemic. And some of the things I'm going to talk about today will, if you joined us for our previous webinars with regard to COVID-19, some of this will be a repeat of information. But because many of you may not have joined us for previous webinars, we'll still be reviewing some of the best practices to avoid infection, including social distancing, hand hygiene, and cleaning and sanitizing. And then we will go into applying best practices with regard to some general guidance and then more specific guidance for farm pickups, farm deliveries, and CSAs. If you have questions, as Colette has stated, please put them in the Q&A boxes. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. So I'm going to start out by discussing what we know about the COVID-19 pandemic and the virus that is causing infection. So COVID-19 is the disease that's caused by the viruses called SARS-CoV-2. And this is a respiratory virus. So it's spread through person-to-person contact through respiratory droplets. So for example, if somebody coughs or sneezes and someone else is in close proximity, then the virus can potentially be spread to other people. The other thing that's important to know is that there's been some information coming out that indicates that there may be some concerns that it could be spread through possibly talking or breathing. This information isn't confirmed and isn't really known. So there's probably a lot less risk through that, through passing the virus through just talking with somebody or breathing near another person. But because we don't know for sure, we still want to take some steps to make sure we are engaging in the best practices to prevent the spread of the virus. The other important thing to know is that the virus may be spread by people who are not showing symptoms. There's been a lot of data that's come out recently that shows that a lot of people may be asymptomatic, so not showing symptoms of being infected with the virus, and then but can still be spreading the virus to other people during this time. And so that makes this another concern because you don't really know who's truly sick and who isn't. And that makes it really difficult to try to control spread of the virus. The virus is not a foodborne pathogen, which means that it's going to be extremely unlikely that someone's going to catch it through eating. So if somebody coughs on your lettuce and then, or touches they're infected, they touch their face, cough in their hand, and then, touch a box. It's not likely that the pathogen is then going to cause respiratory illness. The reason for this is because, when you consume food, the virus would then go down into your stomach where it would be destroyed through the gastrointestinal processes and not enter into the respiratory tract. So it does reduce the risk that we're not seeing it associated with food in any way. The virus, however, can be spread by touching, or may be spread by touching a contaminated surface and then touching one's nose, mouth, or eyes. This is not a primary method, though, again, of how the virus is spread. The virus is mostly spread through respiratory droplets, through coughing and sneezing. The virus, unlike bacteria, will not grow on a surface. So it does not reproduce, it does not multiply and increase its numbers on a surface. It basically stays dormant. Some of the more recent research that has come out has shown that the virus may possibly survive on cardboard for up to 24 hours and up to 2 to 3 days on plastic and stainless steel. So even though we know that it's not likely that somebody's going to touch a surface and then touch their face and potentially become infected, even though the risk of that happening is very low, it's still something to be concerned with. And again, we want to get the risk of viral infection as close to zero as possible. So we know that it can potentially survive on surfaces. We know that if people are handling those surfaces and then touching their face, that there may be a small risk that they'll become infected with the virus. This virus does spread very easily and it spreads more efficiently than influenza. So that is why it's such a concern. It's also a new virus, so there's still a lot more that we need to learn about it. And as you all know, there's not a vaccine or a treatment for this virus. So we really need to utilize what we do know so that we can prevent spread of the virus throughout populations. So with that, I'm going to move on now to talking about practices to avoid infection. And again, if you have If you participated in our previous webinars, there's a lot more, a lot of this will be review for you, but for those that don't know, I'm hoping that this, or have not participated in previous webinars, I'm hoping that this information will be helpful to you. So for those that have previously participated, please bear with me and we will get to more specific information towards the end of this webinar. Right now, social distancing is really important so that we can try to prevent that respiratory spread. So the current guidelines are to stay at least 6 feet away from other people. We do not want people gathering in groups or in congregating in any way. And again, with the restaurants being closed and a lot of other businesses closed, this is to prevent having these mass gatherings and having people congregated within 6 feet of each other, which will increase the likelihood of the virus spreading. So social distancing is going to be a really important preventive measure. Hand and personal hygiene are also essential. There's constant reminders that people should not be touching their eyes, nose, or mouth, and that hand washing needs to occur frequently. So you definitely want people to be washing their hands before and after different activities where they could potentially be exposed to the virus or pick up the virus on their hands. So with hand washing, people need to use soap, of course, and potable water. So water that's of good quality and doesn't contain potential bacteria that could cause disease or viruses. We highly recommend the use of single-use towels. So these can be either paper towels or a cloth towel that's single-use and is single-use and then washed and sanitized. You should also be providing a trash bin to put either the paper towels in that can then be emptied on a regular schedule, or to collect the reusable cloth towels that will need to be washed and sanitized before reuse. And it's going to be really important to monitor the facilities and make sure that they're kept stocked with plenty of soap and water. It's also important to post signs to remind people that they need to be washing their hands. And although it's not specifically stated on this in this flyer from Washington State Department of Health, it's really important that people do a good job of hand washing. So if they scrub their hands for a minimum of 20 seconds, washing both the palms, the backs of their hands, in between their fingers, under their fingernails, and their wrists. So by doing this, this is one of the most effective things you can do to prevent spread of the virus. There's been a lot of questions about use of hand sanitizer, and it's important to remember that although hand sanitizer can be great as a secondary method of killing or removing viruses and bacteria from your hands, it's never a replacement for hand washing. So it's important that people wash their hands properly first, and then if they want to use hand sanitizer after, that's fine. In a lot of cases, hand washing facilities may not be available. So with that regard, it's better to at least use hand sanitizer than to do nothing at all. There's been a lot of information on the market or in social media about using sanitizers that you can make at home. And there's a really big problem with this because sanitizers must contain at least 60% alcohol to be effective against coronavirus. And a lot of these hand sanitizers, these make them yourself type hand sanitizer recipes, end up in a product that doesn't contain at least 60% alcohol is the final concentration of the hand sanitizer. So because of this, we recommend only using commercially produced sanitizers and not ones from home that were made at home. The CDC is now recommending that people wear cloth masks, especially if social distancing cannot be if the 6-foot social distancing requirements cannot be met. It's also going to be really important for people to stay home if they're ill or in contact with an ill person. And with regard to deliveries and CSAs and pickups, which we'll talk more about in a minute, it's going to be really important to post signs letting people know that they need to stay home if they're not feeling well. And that they should also be wearing cloth masks as a precaution. So as a reminder, with a cloth mask, those aren't necessarily to protect you from other people, but it's to they call it respiratory, I'm going blank on the word, sorry about that. But basically it's to keep, so that you keep your own respiratory droplets to yourself. So that's the point of wearing the cloth mask, is for everyone to keep their own germs to themselves, and not necessarily to prevent you from other people's germs. So with cleaning and sanitizing / disinfecting, I'll describe the difference between those in just a minute. You want to be performing regular cleaning and disinfection of different things that are coming into contact, that people are handling, that are being used a lot by different people. So some of these things include like doorknobs, tools, harvest containers, reusable bins and buckets, any food contact surfaces. If you're taking payments, then card readers, you should be cleaning and disinfecting those regularly, and then any other high contact surfaces especially. The frequency of how often you should be doing cleaning and disinfecting of these surfaces is going to depend on the usage. So we'll talk more about that in a minute, but an example is if you're using like a credit card payment system where somebody has to enter in their information, you're going to want to disinfect that surface between each customer. Whereas if it's something like a tool or a harvest container that you're using, you want to make sure that it's clean and disinfected before you use it, and then when you're done using it. Here I'm going to describe the difference between cleaning and then sanitizing and disinfecting. So with cleaning, it removes the germs, dirt, and impurities. And we always tell people you cannot sanitize or disinfect a dirty surface. So the point of using the cleaning step is you're going to use detergent and water to clean the surface, to get rid of dirt and other organic matter from the surface, so that your sanitizer disinfectant will work properly. And the cleaning step in and of itself, by using a detergent, can also lower the number of pathogens, so the number of viruses and bacteria on a surface. Sanitizing specifically lowers the number of pathogens on the surfaces. So a lot of the agents that are available for doing sanitizing and disinfecting are dual use, meaning they'll do either, you can use them as sanitizer or disinfectant. With the sanitizing step, there's a shorter contact time, and a lot of times people use sanitizers approved for food contact surfaces on the actual food contact surfaces. And so with the sanitizing step, for example, it may require that that the product has contact with the surface for an example, 1 minute. Whereas with disinfecting, there's a longer contact time, and that product may need to stay wet on the surface for as long as 4 minutes or even longer. With disinfecting, you are killing the germs on the surfaces, and it's having more of an impact than the sanitizing step because it is in contact with the surface for a longer period of time. So you're definitely going to want to do disinfecting on high contact surfaces, so things like doorknobs or other things that people might be coming into contact with very frequently. Whereas sanitizing, you might be doing that more on your food contact surfaces like bins or tables where produce is being sorted. So with this slide, I'm going to go over the steps of doing a cleaning and sanitizing or disinfecting steps for contact surfaces. So the first step is you want to remove the dirt and debris. So again, this is your cleaning step where you're going to do what you can to try to remove the dirt and debris by spraying it off or using a brush. And then you want to apply detergent and scrub the surface. After that, you would rinse the detergent off and then apply either your sanitizer or your disinfectant, which is approved for use on food contact surfaces to the surface, and then let it air dry. And we'll talk more about this over the next few slides. So with sanitizers or disinfectants, you want to only use those that are approved for food contact surfaces. And we always tell people to make sure that they follow the directions on the label for sanitizing and disinfecting. The label will also let you know if it is approved for food contact surfaces. It's going to tell you how to mix the proper concentration if mixing is required, and then also tell you how long it needs to be in contact with the surface for either sanitizing or disinfecting. There is a list of EPA approved sanitizer and disinfectants against coronavirus, and I've provided the website link for that. It is a pretty extensive list to go through, but if you do click on the link to look at the list, there's a search bar where you can type in things like bleach or Clorox or quaternary ammonium compounds, and it'll give you a list of different products that are effective against coronavirus. There are a lot of common sanitizers on the list, or common sanitizers and disinfectants that can be used against coronavirus. So the most common is using a bleach solution. The concentration you want to use is 5 tablespoons of bleach, household bleach, per gallon of water, or you can use 4 teaspoons of bleach per quart of water. So the bleach should be mixed up pretty frequently. It should be replaced at least once per day. If you can replace it about every 4 hours, that would be even better, because we want to ensure the effectiveness of the bleach solution, because it does degrade over time. It's also, you can also use alcohol. We recommend 70% alcohol concentration if you're going to use it as a disinfectant. And this is either ethanol or isopropyl alcohol that you can use. Just remember that it's very flammable, so keep it away from any ignition sources because you don't want to start a fire if you use that. Also on the EPA list are things like Clorox multi-surface cleaner and bleach, and Clorox and Lysol disinfecting wipes. So those are other ones that are really common that you can use as well. So there's a lot of different surfaces, and they may not be able to really take this intensive cleaning and sanitizing or disinfecting steps very well. So I'm going to give you a few recommendations for different surfaces. So for soft surfaces, you can clean them using soap and water, or other cleaners that are appropriate for the type of surface you're trying to clean, and then follow up with a disinfectant using an EPA registered disinfectant that we know is effective against coronavirus. Alternatively, you can also launder the items according to the manufacturer's instructions. In a previous webinar, we talked about the water temperature that should be used, and you really want to use the hottest appropriate, the hottest water you can use on that soft surface without ruining it. And then after that, you want to make sure that you dry the items completely. So if you can put them in the dryer, that would be a great way to make sure that they get dried thoroughly and are in contact with heat. But alternatively, if that's not possible, because the item won't withstand being placed into a dryer, you can air dry them as well. Electronics is another difficult one. You don't want to be throwing soap and water on them. So the best thing to do is to use some sort of wipeable cover on them if possible. So some type of plastic cover that you can wipe off and disinfect frequently would be best. Alternatively, you can follow the manufacturer's instructions for cleaning and disinfecting if they are available. But if there is no guidance, you can always use alcohol-based wipes or sprays that contain at least 70% alcohol. And you could potentially use other items, other wipes such as like Clorox or Lysol wipes. Just be aware that the Clorox or Lysol wipes can leave a residue as well. And they also require a long contact time, as long as 4 minutes, to be effective at disinfecting the surface. So if this is being used frequently, it might be best to use an alcohol wipe. I'm going to move on now to applying these best practices that we've discussed. And I'm going to start with giving general guidance, because a lot of this guidance is going to overlap whether you're doing a pickup, a delivery, or you have a CSA operation where people are going to basically come pick up their food, but maybe at a different location, such as inside a building. So I'm going to start out with a general guidance and then kind of move back into more specific guidances for each type of scenario. So the first thing you want to do is really limit the total number of people, including workers and visitors, to less than 10. So the less people that are there, the better, and the safer it is. So one thing you might want to do is just have one worker that's dedicated with dealing with customer interaction, so that you have one customer, one worker, and nobody else within, that 6-foot radius. Another thing that's important to do is try to schedule pickup and delivery times so that you're not getting an influx of people in all at once. So if you can get those scheduled, that can help you maintain the social distancing that's required to prevent spread of the virus. And again, with social distancing, you want to maintain at least 6 feet. And it's a good idea to provide ground markers as guidance for people. I'm trying to stay home as much as possible, as I'm sure many of you are too. But I have had to go into a few places where I've seen ground markers. And even though the markers themselves might be 6 feet, they don't really account for, how do you say, like people's girth, or the fact that they might have children with them that they couldn't leave at home. So it's better if you can expand that beyond the 6 feet to allow a little bit of room for people. So the other thing you want to do is make sure you're limiting access to different areas and preventing loitering. So you don't want it to become a social spot. You don't want people standing around talking to each other or looking at things. You basically want people to get their food and leave. So that's really what we're aiming for in this with these recommendations. It's also a really good idea to post signs telling people that if they're feeling ill, that they need to stay home, encouraging the use of face coverings, maintaining social distance, and then definitely any instructions you have for them, which we'll talk more about in just a few minutes. You really want to make sure you're communicating to your customers and making customers aware of your policies. So there's a lot of different ways that you can try to do this, either through using email, social media, newsletters, putting in an announcement in the paper if you need to. But you really want to make sure that customers are aware of what they need to do and what your policies are before they come and interact with you and buy food from you. You definitely want to be providing hand washing stations and or sanitizer. So as I said before, sanitizer is not a replacement for hand washing, so you want to be able to provide some sort of hand washing station whenever possible, and then offer sanitizer as a secondary step. So this is an example from University of Montana Extension. And it shows a very simple hand washing station that you can set up. So basically there's a 5-gallon bucket that contains water. It's good if the water is at least room temperature. If it's warmer, it's better. People are more likely to wash their hands thoroughly if the temperature of the water is comfortable rather than icy cold. I know that's not always possible, but it is something to keep in mind and to consider. If you're using a hand washing station such as this, where there isn't, where it's not hooked up to a sewer line, then you want to have some sort of collection system to collect the wastewater. And then you need to also provide paper towels. So either single-use paper towels or reusable towels that will be single-use and then later washed and dried. And then making sure that the facilities are well stocked and that the wastewater bin and then the trash bins or used towel bins are emptied on a regular basis. You want to make sure that any workers or volunteers are washing their hands after every transaction if possible, and at minimum using hand sanitizers after each transaction. It is okay to use disposable gloves for transactions, but gloves cannot be washed or sanitized and replaced. Disposable gloves are single-use gloves, so you use them and then you would change them in between activities. So you cannot wash and sanitize single-use disposable gloves. The other thing to know is that although gloves can be really helpful, they can also be used in a way that it can increase risk. So for example, if someone's wearing gloves and then they're touching their face and their phone and then touching other surfaces, then in that case, it's not really helpful to be using gloves. So because of that, you know, they're not necessarily required, but it is something that you might want to consider, but people need to understand how to use them properly, that they're going to put them on, that they're going to use them for a particular activity or transaction, and then they're going to take them off and throw them away, and that they cannot be washed or sanitized and reused. With the new CDC recommendations, your workers or volunteers should be wearing masks. So that's going to really help with protecting each other and preventing the spread of the virus. As I said before, a lot of people may be carrying the virus and not showing symptoms that they're infected. So because of that, it is good for workers or volunteers to be wearing masks. And then, as I've already discussed, you want to be cleaning high-touch surfaces on a regular basis. So things like credit card readers, tables, bins, tools, those sorts of things. And if you were unable to join us for our previous webinar on community gardens, please do feel free to go back to that webinar series. It was recorded and is available for you to watch. And we talk a lot about doing cleaning and sanitizing of different things such as tools, wheelbarrows, those sorts of things. So please do feel free to watch that video if you want more information on different things that are going to be utilized on the farm. So whoever is working for your farm and for your CSA, you really want to make sure that they're trained well. You need to let them know that they're not supposed to be reporting to work or volunteering if they're showing any symptoms of illness, which include fever, shortness of breath, or a cough. Some employers have begun doing screening of their employees for symptoms, such as doing temperature checks before they begin working. It's really up to you whether you want to do that or not. But again, making sure that people know that they're not allowed to come do any type of work if they're having any symptoms. Again, it's a really good idea and strongly encouraged that you require the use of cloth face mask or coverings. And I've already talked about the use of and disposal of gloves, but that's something that is an option, but just keeping in mind that they need to be disposed of properly and they need to be used properly. And that's going to be important to provide training to people on that. And then it's going to also be important for them to know that they need to maintain social distancing, not only between themselves and other workers, but also between customers as well. Anybody that is also doing work with you should be aware of visitor policies and be helping you to maintain them. And then also should be aware of any policies that you've put into place regarding cleaning and sanitizing and frequency. So what types of objects need to be cleaned and sanitized? Are there different practices or frequency for cleaning and sanitizing different types of surfaces? And know who's responsible for doing that and how often it needs to be done. If you're using, if you're gonna be accepting payments from customers on a more regular basis, so for example, if it hasn't already been set up to use an electronic payment system or an online payment system, that might be something that you want to start considering to use. So I have provided some different examples of payment systems that are available, and it's a really good idea to look into potentially utilizing one of these payment options so that you're not having to deal with things like credit card readers and having to do these transactions in person. It's better to just take care of these online and reduce the interactions between yourself and the customers. I'm going to start talking about a little more of the specifics for each type of operation. And so hopefully these will help you with some beyond the basic information I've already provided to you. So for farm pickups, you really want to make sure you're using well-designated pickup locations and that you've communicated these locations to your customer prior to the pickup. And so it's going to be really important to either, when you're arranging that you're making sure that they know exactly where to go and that you have signage available to help direct the customer there, so that they're not having a lot of person-to-person interactions. You want them, again, to come in, get their produce, and then leave. You want to maintain that social distancing. So some of the things you can do with pickups to help with that, for example, would be to place the food in the trunk. I don't know if any of you guys, for example, have used like Walmart grocery pickup. They're now asking you to stay in your car. They stay outside of 6 feet from you, and they ask you, what your name is, and then you pop your trunk and they put the groceries in the trunk. And if you can't pop your trunk from inside the car, then you can ask them to put them in your back seat. But again, it's a good idea to try to maintain that social distancing during the pickup. And then again, taking online payments can be really helpful so that you're limiting that interaction time. And then you want to make sure that you restrict access to other areas. So you don't want somebody wandering around or, hanging out and visiting with other people. So you just want them to get their food and leave. So again, it's a good idea to wear, the gloves are optional, but it's a good idea to wear some sort of face mask, a cloth face mask. And then definitely, if you're wearing gloves, to make sure you change them after your interaction with a customer, and that you're washing and sanitizing your hands afterwards as well. If you're going to be using things like drop boxes, or there's going to be other contact points, or you're going to be using payment systems during the farm pickup, you want to make sure that you're cleaning and sanitizing or disinfecting those surfaces in between customers. Moving on now to farm deliveries. Again, you want to contact the person prior to making the delivery. So you want to be able to obtain delivery instructions, and you want to be, again, limiting that face-to-face contact. With regard to the delivery vehicle, before you even put food in there to go take the delivery, you want to disinfect the steering wheel, door handles, and other high contact surfaces. And then, of course, you always want to ensure that the vehicle is clean and ready to transport food. So even if we are not having a coronavirus pandemic, you should be ensuring that the vehicle is clean and ready to transport food. And when doing deliveries, you definitely want to be wearing a face covering, and then again, disposable gloves are an option. They're not necessary, but they are an option. It's a good idea to place the produce in a clean location as far away from the driver as possible. So for example, if you're going to be delivering using a small van or a small vehicle, you don't necessarily want to put the produce right next to you on the passenger seat. It would be a better idea to put it in the back seat or in the trunk, or maybe if it's a van, to put it further back by the doors at the rear of the vehicle. Some things you can do if you're doing a drop-off where you're not having contact with the customer is to confirm the drop-off with a photograph if you need to, so that you can show them where you've placed the produce and that it was dropped off in the location specified. And then you can also make a phone call to notify them that their produce has been delivered, so that they can come out onto their porch or wherever the designated drop-off place is to retrieve the produce. And this can really help with maintaining that social distancing and those person-to-person interactions. You also want to have additional disinfection materials on hand, so that if you are having contact with different surfaces, that you can disinfect those surfaces on a regular basis. One thing I'll bring up here real quick too before I move on is that, you know, if you're doing on-farm pickups, you might want to consider switching over to doing deliveries, so that you don't have a lot of people coming into your facilities and onto your farm. So that might be one thing you want to consider. And again, with CSAs in general, that same recommendation there, to consider converting to delivery if possible. If you can't do that, then of course, you know, you can always consider doing on-farm pickup, doing delivery specifically to a customer's vehicle, or having a clean and sanitized drop box available where you can schedule pickups via a drop box. You want to use designated pickup locations, which I'm sure you're doing already, but you want to communicate this information to the customer prior to them coming to pick up their food. And then again, use signage to direct the customer. So again, we're really trying to have the customer come to a particular place, know exactly where they're going, not having to have a lot of person-to-person interaction, and then just picking up their produce and leaving. And also with CSAs, you want to make sure that you're taking on, you want to make sure that you're limiting interactions. So taking online payments is going to be really helpful with doing that. So if you can arrange for payment before the pickup, that would be best. So again, with CSAs, the same thing. You want to maintain that social distancing greater than at least 6 feet, but hopefully you can make it a little greater than 6 feet. It's going to be really important to schedule pickup and delivery times as well, because you don't want that influx of customers all at once. You want them to be staggered out so that it's easier for you to maintain social distancing, easier for them as well. So make sure you provide some ground markers too, if you are going to have, you know, several people coming over a time period. providing those ground markers can help with that. And again, you want to actively be limiting access and any loitering and conversations. It's a really good idea also to post signs reminding visitors of your policies and reminding them that, you know, these changes are being put into place because of the pandemic and for their own protection. So you really, you know, some of the light signs you might want to consider putting up and that could be really important are to remind visitors that they should not be visiting if they're ill, and encouraging the use of face coverings. And then reminding them about social distancing and any instructions you have for them as well. You really want to look at limiting the number of workers or volunteers in an area, especially if you are using a building where you're going to have people that are trying to get the produce together for the customers, hand those off to the customers, and then having the customers coming in as well. So you want to keep that number under 10 people. And again, the fewer people you have inside the facility, the easier it is to maintain that social distancing and to prevent the spread of coronavirus. And again, making sure that nobody is coming in that's ill, including workers that are ill with a virus or have been in contact with individuals that are infected, and then of course your customers too. You really want to limit your interactions with the customers, and you know, I've talked about this a lot already. So again, taking those online payments before the customer arrives, having things pre-marked already so that they can just come in, take their produce and leave right away. So being really organized so that you can limit those interactions and time spent. You do not want to allow any food sampling or food demonstrations because again, you know, that causes people to hang around in groups and also increases the amount of contact. So you don't want somebody that's potentially sick coming in and, you know, taking a sample and potentially contaminating a surface. So we're trying to reduce that. So you want to stop any food sampling or demonstration activities during this time. And then another thing to consider is converting from customer choice boxes to doing standardized boxes, so that you don't have customers that are coming in and making decisions on the spot as to what type of produce they want in their box. So this can really, again, help with reducing those interactions and lengths of interactions. Another option that you can do is switch over to allowing for a choice of options before pickup even occurs. So if you are going to allow choice boxes to have those choices made and to have the produce ready to go for that particular customer before they even arrive to pick it up. So a little more information too with regard to the different types of boxes, you know, choice boxes versus standardized boxes, and those interactions with customers for handoffs. If you're using things like a cardboard box or a plastic bin, what you might want to do, and what we strongly urge you to do, is to use a plastic liner. So cardboard you can't really clean and sanitize, and it's going to be, you know, expensive. So one thing you can do is use a plastic liner to put the customer's food in, and then when the customer comes, you just pick up the liner and hand it to the customer. Plastic boxes that can be cleaned and sanitized in between use should be cleaned and sanitized in between use. And even with ones that can be cleaned and sanitized, using the liner is an extra precaution and a good idea. You don't want customers to really be, a lot of customers might want to use their own reusable shopping bags, and you really don't want customers bringing those bags in. It just if they're going to bring it in a bag, then it's likely to be sitting on a surface. And even though the risk of transmission from a reusable grocery bag to a table and then to a worker or another customer is low, you really just want to reduce that overall. Again, we're trying to get the risk of transmitting the virus as close to zero as possible. So a better thing to do is just to use things like grocery bags, or again, just do the plastic liner. And then if the customer wants to take that and put that liner, that plastic liner with the produce in their own shopping bag, when they get back to their car, that's fine. But, you know, make sure to give other options to kind of reduce the amount of contact surfaces that you need to be concerned with. Another thing that you might want to put into place is a continuity of business plan. So this is really an alternative plan in case there's some sort of disruption, or for example, if you become ill with coronavirus and have to self-quarantine for 14 days. So this is something that you should be working on putting into place now. And so some of the things that you might want to ask and decide are who's going to take over and direct your operations if you were to become ill, or if a large number of your workers become ill. How are customers going to be notified? Who's going to be responsible for notifying the customers? And what's going to happen? Are you going to have to tell customers that you're not going to be able to deliver the produce after all during this time period because an illness has occurred, and that, you know, there aren't going to be any pickups or deliveries available for an extended length of time? Or is there going to be another party that can take over those responsibilities for you? And if you do have a backup person, is that person aware of your current operations, your current policies, and how you're taking care of the customers and delivering food to them? And then if for any reason an employee becomes sick or exposes other customers or other workers, do you have a way to contact your customers? Do you, you know, what are you going to do under those circumstances, and how are you going to handle that? So those are things that can be really helpful for your business to plan ahead for, and to make alternative plans just in case. So that way you can reduce the impacts to your farm and to your business. So in summary, the virus, again, is primarily spread to others through respiratory droplets. And even though there's a really low risk of infection through surfaces, we're really striving to reduce that risk as close to zero as possible. So it's really important to take those extra steps and increase your cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting, and to put these practices that I've discussed today into place. This is really going to help with reducing the chances for spreading the virus. We want to reduce person-to-person contact and reduce spread. So with this, we want to reduce the speed and efficiency in which you are serving your customers. So you want either your customers or your delivery drivers to basically get in, get the food, or leave the food and then get out. So this is really what we're striving for. And on a more pleasant note, you know, this too will pass. These are temporary measures that need to be put into place. You know, a lot of people have brought up that a lot of these measures are good to implement during flu season, right? Because flu, although not as deadly as coronavirus, is still of great concern as well. So a lot of these practices would be great to hold on to even in the future. But the pandemic will eventually pass, and these are temporary measures. It's difficult. There's a lot of changes that need to take place, but ultimately it's going to really help you with ensuring that you can continue operations with your business. I have a list of additional resources here. There's one resource that I wanted to mention specifically that I haven't done yet. On the Cultivating Success website, there is a webinar from last week on farmers markets and farm stands. And Dr. Faith Kreitzer with Washington State University, we covered a lot of information on sanitizers, how they kill viruses and how they work. And so if that's something you're interested in gaining more information about, please do visit the Cultivating Success website and watch her webinar on farm stands and farmers markets. We do have resources available at WSU on 2 different websites. Resources on this particular topic are available through the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, and then also the Western Regional Center to Enhance Food Safety has a lot of COVID-19 resources, especially focused on, and there's focused resources, especially for growers. Always feel free to reach out to your local extension office. Extension is here to serve you, and we're always happy to help you in any way we can. And if that particular person can't answer your question, they can most likely pass you on to somebody that can. And then, of course, your Department of Agriculture is really trying to provide, a lot of states' departments of agriculture are trying to provide resources for growers to help them during this time, because you guys truly are essential. So we're dependent on you so that we can get nutrients and eat. So thank you for all the work you do. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. We do have a couple questions. The first question is going back to talking about cleaning and sanitizing cloth towels. So the question is, how do you sanitize a cloth towel beyond laundry washing? And is that a necessary practice to sanitize cloth?
That is a really great question, and I'm glad you asked that. So a lot of the washing machines have a sanitation cycle on them where the water gets extremely hot. And a lot of the washing machines will have a built-in heater to increase the temperature of the water above that comes out from your water heater. So if the towels, if you have a washing machine that has that option on it, and it also and the fabric, whatever you're washing, can also withstand that temperature, then it's a good idea to use it. So it's going to really help with reducing any potential bacteria or viral load that might be on the towel. So having said that, if the fabric cannot undergo that high of a temperature, you just do want to go back to at least washing it at the highest temperature that fabric can, or that surface can take. So, you know, again, with the soap in the water, the detergent itself is going to be very helpful in removing the virus, because the detergent will help with disrupting the envelope that's surrounding the virus, and then which thus helps inactivate the virus.
Thank you. We have another question that's related to CSA pickups on the farm and the type of containers that you would recommend for individual produce pickups. So do you want to just run through real quickly what your best recommendations would be and what you think the most affordable options are for CSA pickups?
Yes, that's a good question. So I think some of the most affordable options would be using grocery bags, and then second to that, using plastic liners. So cardboard, with cardboard, you can't really clean and sanitize it, which is a problem. And then on top of it, if you're giving away the cardboard then to the customer, the boxes can be pretty spendy over time. So probably grocery bags would be your best, and then using some sort of plastic liner if you are going to have to use cardboard boxes, or even if you're using boxes that can be cleaned and sanitized appropriately. Using plastic liners within those boxes would probably be my second recommendation to use.
Great, thank you. And I'd just like to say that if you do plan to use paper bags or plastic liners, even if your CSA isn't going to start until late May or early June, you want to order those now because things are taking longer for delivery and they can be on back order. So just make sure that you don't wait until the last minute. And then you'll also want to think about making sure that you can use new and disposable containers. So for instance, if you put your cherry tomatoes in a small basket, that's a basket that you're not expecting to come back. You're not expecting somebody to actually reuse that basket. So there's some nice cardboard paper type baskets that you might consider. But again, letting your customers know that you're encouraging them not to reuse the materials that you're providing with them. The one last thing that I'd like to ask you, Stephanie, is what about vinegar? A number of people ask, can vinegar be used as a sanitizer?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Vinegar is not that good of a sanitizer to use, and it's not shown to be, it has not been shown to be effective against coronavirus at this time. So again, sticking to the EPA list of sanitizers is going to be really important, and or using the bleach solution or ethanol are going to be your best bets. I absolutely do not recommend using vinegar at this time as an effective measure against coronavirus because there's no proof that it works.
Great, thank you. Those are all the questions that we have today. Thank you so much for your presentation. We really appreciate it. I'm just going to take a couple seconds to show you all where you can find the recorded webinars that we talked about today. If you go to the Cultivating Success website, you'll see this button, Recorded Webinars, in the light blue. That is where you're going to find the previous COVID-19 webinars that we've done, as well as a recording of this webinar. We have an extensive list of resources that we continue to update here at the COVID-19 resource button. You can also register for our upcoming webinars, and I'm going to show you what those are now. So we have 3 webinars that are ready and available for you to register for. Next week on Tuesday, April 28th, we'll be doing a webinar on backyard poultry production and safe egg handling. On Tuesday, May 5th, we're going to be looking at local food system businesses, and this includes farm businesses. As we move out of this time of sheltering at home, there's going to be a lot of transitional steps, and there are a lot of resources that are coming out that are going to provide financial help and transitional help for farms and food businesses. So we're going to be talking about those on Tuesday, May 5th. And then on May 11th, we're going to be talking about selling your products on Etsy. Stephanie talked a lot about the importance of taking online payments. And I do want to point out that we do have a recorded webinar on the Cultivating Success website that's specifically about selling your products online. It talks about very simple web page programs that you can subscribe to, and then the pros and cons of different ways of taking money. And so that might be really helpful to you if you haven't taken online payments before. We do really appreciate your feedback, so we encourage you to complete your post-webinar evaluation. This evaluation, the link to it should just open right up in your browser when we conclude today's webinar. If it does not, the link is in the handouts that I emailed you and will also be available in a follow-up email that you will receive tomorrow that also includes a link to where you'll find the webinar recordings and handouts. If you do complete the webinar evaluation, we really appreciate knowing if there are other topics specifically that you need information on in the short term so that we can try to make those available through additional webinars or through our resource guide that is on the Cultivating Success website. With that, I want to thank you again, Stephanie, for your presentation today, and thanks everyone for joining us for this webinar. Be safe and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.